On October 15th, a U.S.-operated luxury cruise ship, the Riviera, was sailing toward Shanghai. On board, approximately 150 passengers were anticipating their arrival. But when the vessel was just 48 nautical miles from the terminal, the captain received a new urgent message. If the Riviera continued to its planned docking, the ship would be hit with an immediate non-negotiable invoice, a special port fee of 1.64 million US dollars. The decision from the company headquarters in Miami was immediate. The ship turns around. It bypasses China entirely and detours to Busan, South Korea. Passengers were left furious. Their itineraries were ruined. The reason for this chaos? A new retaliatory measure from China, designed specifically to punish American companies in response to Washington's Section 301 investigation. The media reported this story. A U.S. ship forced to flee a Chinese port, paying the price of a trade war. But that is not the most interesting part of this story. The real story is what happened the very next day. Because on October 16th, another massive cruise ship, the Spectrum of the Seas, operated by another U.S. company, Royal Caribbean, sailed directly into Shanghai, docked at the terminal, and disembarked its passengers. And it paid nothing, not 1 cent. Why? Why was one American company forced to flee and absorb a multi-million-dollar loss, while another American company from the same city was given a red carpet welcome? This wasn't favoritism. This was a strategic chess match. And today we decode the rules of the exemption game. The other American. To understand this, you must first understand the players. On one side of the board, we have player one, the loser. The ship is the Riviera, operated by Oceania Cruises. Oceania is a subsidiary of Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, headquartered in Miami, Florida, a clearly American company, penalized $164 million. On the other side, we have player two, the winner. The ship is the Spectrum of the Seas, operated by the Royal Caribbean Group. Their headquarters also in Miami, Florida, a clearly American company. Their result, 100% fee exemption. On the surface, this makes no sense. The Chinese policy was explicitly designed to target U.S. companies as a retaliation for the Section 301 tariffs. Both targets seem identical, but this is precisely where politicians in Washington and Beijing fail to understand how the real world actually operates. The global economy is not run by politicians. It is run by multinational corporations, their lawyers, and a set of rules that exist outside of national borders. To understand how Royal Caribbean won, you must stop thinking like a citizen and start thinking like a maritime lawyer. Module 3. Decoding the exemption game. First, let's examine the weapon itself. China's new retaliatory measure was not a blunt axe. It was a surgical tool. Based on the original report, the policy was designed to impose fees on ships that met several criteria. We only need to focus on the three main triggers. Number 1, vessels owned by U.S. companies. Number 2, vessels flying the U.S. flag. And number 3, vessels built in the United States or by U.S. shipbuilders. You only needed to trigger one of these to be liable for the fee. The Riviera, Oceania, clearly triggered number 1. It was owned by a U.S. company. The Spectrum of the Seas, Royal Caribbean, also triggered number 1. So, how did it disarm the other triggers? This is where the game begins. This is loophole number 1, the flag. While Royal Caribbean is an American company, its ship is not an American vessel. It is registered in Nassau in the Bahamas. In international maritime law, the nationality of a ship is determined by the flag it flies, not the headquarters of its owner. Legally, the Spectrum of the Seas is a Bahamian vessel, so the second trigger targeting U.S.-flagged ships was neutralized. Next, loophole number 2, the builder. Where was this billion-dollar megaship constructed? Not in a shipyard in Mississippi or Virginia. As the original report confirmed, the ship was built in Germany. It was constructed at the Meyerwerft shipyard in Papenburg, Germany. This is an important hidden fact. The United States, despite its naval power, is not a major builder of large commercial cruise ships. That market is dominated by shipyards in Europe, specifically Germany, France, Italy, and Finland. The spectrum of the JCs was never an American-built ship. And just like that, the third trigger was also neutralized. But wait, the central problem remains. The ship was still owned by an American company, Royal Caribbean. That was trigger number one. That trigger was still active. So technically, it should have been forced to pay the $1.64 million fee, just like the Riviera. Why did it get a pass? This is the most brilliant part of the entire strategy. The answer is found in Article 6 of the Chinese regulation. This was a safety switch, a surgical exemption clause. The original report stated that a vessel could be exempted if it, 1, primarily serves Chinese passengers, and 2, is part of a commercial tourism program targeting the Chinese market. On October 16th, Chinese authorities reviewed the Spectrum's manifest. They determined, as confirmed in the transcript, that more than 95% of the passengers aboard were Chinese citizens. The ship was not bringing foreign tourists into China. The ship was operating a local tourism route, making money from Chinese citizens. This is economic martial arts. China created a weapon that looked terrifying to Washington, a weapon that made headlines and showed they were getting tough on America. But they built in a secret safety switch so that the weapon could not be used to harm their own domestic tourism economy. They successfully punished the Riviera, a ship bringing foreign tourists and their foreign money in. But they welcomed the Spectrum, a ship operating within their own economy. It was a brilliant, surgical, strategic move. Module 4, The Real Game, Flags of Convenience. This brings us to the real game behind the game. It forces us to ask the logical question, why would a multi-billion-dollar, all-American company headquartered in Miami register its most expensive ships in the Bahamas, or Panama, or Liberia? Welcome to the biggest and most open secret in the entire global economy. It's a system known as the Flag of Convenience, or FOC. This is not the exception, it is the rule. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, the FOC system is massive. If you look at the entire world's merchant fleet, just 3 countries, Panama, Liberia, and the Marshall Islands, control over 40% of the entire fleet by deadweight tonnage. Greek-owned ships fly the Panamanian flag, Japanese-owned ships fly the Liberian flag, and American-owned ships fly the flag of the Bahamas or the Marshall Islands. They do this for 3 very simple reasons: money, money, and money. Number 1, taxes. Nations like the Bahamas, Panama, and Liberia are, in effect, tax havens for shipping. They charge a very small initial registration fee and a modest fixed annual fee. Compare this to a ship registered in the United States. That ship and the profit it generates worldwide would be subject to the 21% U.S. federal corporate income tax. A ship registered in the Bahamas pays a 0% income tax. By simply flying the Bahamian flag, Royal Caribbean legally shields hundreds of millions of dollars in profits from the IRS. It is the largest legal tax avoidance strategy on the planet. Number 2, regulations and labor. This is the more controversial part. When a ship flies the U.S. flag, it is legally U.S. territory. It must abide by U.S. labor laws. It must pay the U.S. federal minimum wage. It must adhere to strict U.S. safety and environmental standards, OSHA and the EPA. When a ship flies the flag of Panama, it abides by Panamanian labor law. This allows corporations to hire their crews from a global talent pool, often from the Philippines, India, or Eastern Europe, at wages that are significantly lower than U.S. standards. This is global arbitrage. Corporations use these FOC nations to shop for the weakest regulations and the cheapest labor costs. Do you remember the container ship Ever Given? The one that famously blocked the Suez Canal in 2021? It is the perfect example of this entire system. The Ever Given was operated by a Taiwanese company owned by a Japanese firm, crewed by Indian sailors, and flagged in Panama. So when China created a policy that targeted U.S.-flagged ships, they knew exactly what they were doing. They were aiming a weapon at a target that barely exists. The American shipping fleet isn't legally American at all. This flag of convenience system is the hidden engine that keeps the global economy moving. And while Royal Caribbean masterfully used this global system to avoid the fee, what about the American companies and the American workers who couldn't? In our next video, we will investigate the collateral damage of this trade war, the ghost ports, and the lost American jobs back home that this system creates. Module 5, the thesis and the resonance point, and this game of identity is not just about flags. As we saw in the original video report, the corporate shell game goes even deeper. Just 3 days before China's new policy took effect, the U.S. tanker company Okeanis Eco-Tankers announced that 2 of its American board members were suddenly resigning. Why? Because one of the triggers in China's policy was targeting companies whose chairman is an American citizen. By having their American executives resign, they could legally change the nationality of the company's leadership to bypass the rules. They changed their CEOs, just like Royal Caribbean changes its flag. It is all a game. In the end, this $1.6 million mystery reveals a much larger, more profound truth. The U.S.-China trade war is not a battle between 2 countries. It is a game played between politicians and the multinational corporations that have become too large, too fluid, and too strategic to be sanctioned. The Royal Caribbean exemption is the proof. It proves that modern corporate identity is the ultimate loophole. It proves that in this globalized world, national allegiance is fluid, and it renders national retaliation almost meaningless. This leaves us with one final structural question, and I want to ask you, in this global shell game of flags and registrations and executive nationalities, does national identity for a corporation even mean anything anymore? Or is it just a flag they choose to fly when it's convenient? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.